Korean War is one of the darkest conflicts in human history. Millions of people lost their lives in a 3-year span. When the fighting stopped in 1953, a group of U.S. soldiers emerged from the darkness of a prisoner of war camp, bearing an almost 4-foot-high crucifix. It was carved out of firewood with a crown of thorns woven from radio wire. A Jewish POW made it in honor of the Catholic chaplain that men of every faith loved, Father Kapaun. Father Kapaun grew up in rural Kansas, and he was baptized at the parish his parents were married in, eventually became pastor there, but he felt like God was calling him to the front lines. He became a military chaplain, entered the Korean War. He was known for his intense devotion to the soldiers who he called "my boys," and they loved him for it. He put thousands of miles on his Jeep to bring the presence of Christ in the Eucharist to the front lines. He'd often celebrate Mass for them on the hood of his Jeep. On November 2nd, 1950, a battle broke out. He was with a few thousand American soldiers, and they were overrun by over 20,000 communist Chinese forces. In the ensuing chaos, Father Kapaun ran past the front lines into no man's land and dragged people to safety, comforted people who were dying, anointed people who were injured. Even after the sound to evacuate, he kept doing his work. One of the men whose lives he saved that day, Sergeant Herbert Miller, was lying on the ground wounded, and a communist soldier was about to end his life with a rifle. He ran up, pushed that soldier aside, picked Sergeant Miller off the ground. The soldier could have ended both their lives, but instead he stood there, mouth agape, stunned at Father Kapaun's courage and love. A death march ensued. All the soldiers were made to march over 40 miles. Anyone who straggled or couldn't continue was killed right there. Father Kapaun carried Sergeant Miller and helped him walk through that entire 40 miles. And all along, he also helped pick up other soldiers who were about to give up their lives, encouraging them to go on. But the story doesn't end there. In the prisoner of war camp, Father Kapaun was like a mother to all those soldiers. He found a way to sneak out of camp to get food to supplement their starvation rations. He found a way to make a bowl out of a piece of metal so he could boil water to save the fellow soldiers from dysentery. He'd help keep them clean, he'd wash their clothes, he'd lead them in prayer services. He'd celebrate Mass in secret when he could. And on Easter Sunday, he led them in a prayer service, inspired everyone so much that the whole camp erupted in songs of praise to God. The communists hated him for the hope that he brought to his fellow prisoners. They'd make him stand in the bitter cold naked for hours. They brought him to classes where they'd educate him on communist doctrine. When he finally got sick, they saw it as their chance to get rid of him. They brought him to a death house. That's what the soldiers called it. They called it their hospital, but no one ever came back alive. When they were taking him away, his soldiers were crying, just begging them not to take their priest from them. But he comforted them. He said, "Boys, I'm going where I've always wanted to go. When I get there, I'll pray for you." The last thing they saw him do in this life was bless the men who were taking him to his death and prayed out loud, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Father Kapaun is the most highly decorated chaplain in U.S. military history. When he finally got the Medal of Honor in 2013, 9 of the men who he helped survive through that prison camp were present, including Sergeant Herbert Miller, who he had helped carry 40 miles 63 years before. No doubt there are a lot of stories like Father Kapaun's who are buried in the earth, who we'll never learn of on this side of eternity. Men who laid down their lives for their friends, for their brothers in the course of war. But when the story of human history is over, evil, death, darkness, they don't get the final word. The love of God does. And it was that love that gave Father Kapaun the courage to lay down his life for his friends. Though I may walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you're with me. Father Kapaun, pray for us.